The wind carried dust like old secrets across the wide belly of the valley, swirling through cottonwoods and catching on the splintered rails of a long-forgotten fence. It was land meant for cattle or corn if a man had the will and the water. And someone did, or at least claimed they would soon enough. A letter sealed in wax had been sent from a distant desk, its language sharp with terms and timelines. The land was to be purchased or taken, made useful, worthwhile. Calder rode into the valley with the setting sun slung low behind him, painting his silhouette long and narrow across the dry earth. He was a man of contracts and consequences, broad-shouldered and weathered, but cleaner than most who passed through the Western Territories. His coat was stitched fine, though dulled by trail dust, and his boots carried the polish of someone not born to dirt. He was not cruel, but he was cold when he needed to be, which was often. The land he came for stretched 3 miles west to the river, where cottonwoods ran like a green scar across the plain. There was a ranch house there, squat and stubborn, built into the rise like it was trying not to be noticed. It was that house, and the woman in it, that kept the land from changing hands. She was the last thing standing in the way. We had her name on a piece of paper. Eleanor Breyer, widow, 34, no known children. It was meant to be a simple negotiation. He arrived at dusk, the air turning sharp as the sun bled out of the sky. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and gray, a sign of life and resistance. He dismounted, tied his horse, and walked the last few steps up the porch. Before he could knock, the door opened. She stood in the doorway with a shotgun resting across her arms like it belonged there. Her hair was dark and pulled back, her eyes the color of storm-washed soil. Not young, not fragile, but with the kind of quiet gravity that draws the tide. She did not look surprised to see him. "You're late," she said. "I didn't know I had an appointment." "You all come eventually, men with letters, men with maps." He paused, then took off his hat. "We's Calder, I was sent by." "I know who sent you." Her gaze flicked down to the envelope in his hand. "You can keep your paper." "I'm not here to cause trouble, Mrs. Breyer. I just want to talk." "You can talk from the porch." He glanced past her shoulder. The inside of the house was dim, warm with lamplight. There were books on the table, a fire burning low, signs of a life not easily uprooted. "It's a fair offer," he said. "Maybe for someone who doesn't live here." Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. The kind of silence that speaks of things unsaid, of history buried in dirt and blood and weather. She didn't lower the gun. He didn't ask her to. "I'll be in town," he said finally. "Staying at the livery's back room, if you change your mind." She didn't answer, only stepped back and closed the door. That night we drank bitter coffee in a room that smelled of hay and horse sweat. He laid the papers out on a crate, stared at the figures. He'd seen land worth less fetch a higher price. But numbers didn't mean much out here. People did, and people were stubborn as hell when they believed in something. Across the valley, Eleanor sat by her fire, the shotgun leaned against her chair. The dog she'd taken in after her husband died slept at her feet, his body curved to the shape of her grief. She stared into the flames like they might give her answers, or the strength to face another season alone. Neither of them slept well. The next morning brought frost, and a wind that hinted at winter's edge. We watched the sun rise over the distant ridge, wondering what kind of woman turned away money in a place like this. What kind of love bound her so tightly to dust and wood and silence? He saddled up. There were fences to walk, water lines to check, terrain to know. If he couldn't buy the land, maybe he could understand it, and in understanding, find another way through. But he didn't know yet what he was truly up against, that it wasn't just land or stubborn pride. It was a life built from loss, a sanctuary of memory, and a woman who would not be moved by threats or promises. Not because she didn't need, but because she'd already lost too much. And Wheeze, despite all his training and cold resolve, had no defense against that kind of fire. Not yet, the valley didn't take to strangers easily. It watched them, tested them, waited to see if they'd stay or vanish like the snow come spring. Wheeze Calder moved through its mornings like a man walking into a story he didn't yet understand. He studied the land as if it were a ledger, but its pages didn't turn the way he wanted. 3 days passed before he saw Eleanor again. She rode out early, her figure cutting clean against the sky, a silhouette in a faded coat and a wide-brimmed hat. She carried a coil of rope and a rifle, and her horse moved with the easy trust of long companionship. He watched from a distance, making no move to follow. By the fourth day, a broken fence near the south pasture gave him a reason to show up. The posts leaned like drunkards and wire hung loose where cattle might wander. He found her there, boots planted firm, hammer in hand. "I was fixing this," she said, not looking up. "I noticed it sagging on my ride out. Figured you could use another pair of hands." She didn't thank him, but she didn't send him away either. He took that as progress. Together they worked in a silence that grew less sharp with every minute, the kind born of shared labor and weathered patience. When the final wire was stretched and nailed tight, she offered him water from her canteen. "You planning on staying long?" she asked. "Long as I need to." She nodded once, as if that answer satisfied something in her, then turned back toward her horse. "You do this all yourself?" he asked. "The ranch?" "I do what I can. The rest waits or breaks." "And the land, you don't lease, sell, share?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You still think I'll give it up?" "I think you've got reasons. I just don't know them yet." She swung into her saddle. "Then maybe it's not your business." He didn't argue. Instead, he watched her ride off, dust rising like smoke behind her. The truth was, he was beginning to forget why he came. The contract in his coat pocket felt heavier than it used to. Back in town, he met with the banker who'd first reached out about the land. A man named Harrow, pale as milk and twice as slick. "She still won't sign?" Harrow asked, peering over his spectacles. "No. You need to press harder. Remind her of the taxes coming due." "She knows." "Well, if she defaults, it'll go to auction, but you'd be wise to get ahead of it." Weeze nodded, but something in him recoiled. He left Harrow's office with a sour taste in his mouth and rode back out to the edge of the briar land. He didn't go to the house. Instead, he walked the fields, noting where water pooled, where the soil turned richer. He found an old orchard, overgrown and struggling, but still bearing apples small and tart. He picked one, bit into it. It tasted like something real. That evening, Alina came to town. She walked into the general store with a list and a determined gait. Weeze was already inside, talking with the storekeeper about feed prices. When she entered, conversation stilled for a moment, not out of judgment, but respect. Folks in town knew her story, though they didn't speak it aloud. He tipped his hat as she passed. She gave a short nod. Later outside, he offered to carry her sack of flour. She hesitated, then handed it over without a word. "Why'd you come back here?" she asked as they walked toward her wagon. "You don't strike me as the type who likes dirt under his nails." "I thought I was. Turns out I might have been wrong." She studied him sidelong. "Most men want land to shape it into something else. You walk it like it might shape you." He loaded the sack. "Maybe I'm trying to see what's worth keeping." A pause stretched between them, the kind that lets the heart speak if the mouth stays shut. "I buried my husband under the cottonwood by the ridge," she said quietly. "This land's got his blood in it, my father's too, and mine soon enough." He looked at her, saw the weight she bore like it was stitched to her bones. Not bitterness, but memory. Love worn smooth by time and trial. "I didn't come here looking for that," he said, "but I see it now." She climbed into the wagon, reins in hand. "Then maybe you'll stop trying to take it." She drove off without waiting for his answer. And Weeze, standing in the dusk with dust on his boots and her words in his chest, knew something had changed. Not in her, not yet, but in him. What had begun as a job was becoming something else. Something slower, deeper. The land still mattered, but not in the way it once had. Not more than the woman who refused to leave it. Not more than the feeling that maybe he didn't want to leave either. The first snow came early that year, soft and sullen, muffling the earth beneath a veil of white. It clung to fence posts and rooftops, turned the dirt roads to mud, and slowed the valley into silence. We stood outside the livery one morning, watching the snow fall like it had somewhere to go. The land looked different under snow, cleaner, quieter, but also lonelier. It was easy to forget what was buried beneath. He hadn't seen Alina in a week, not since the day she drove off with her wagon and his understanding in tow. But he thought of her each morning, imagined her walking through the snow to the barn, breaking the ice in the troughs, feeding the stock with calloused hands. There was a rhythm to her days, a solitude he had come to respect. We knew now he wouldn't force her hand. The contract remained folded in his coat pocket, untouched. He still hadn't written back to Harrow. Let the man sweat. One afternoon, he took the long trail out to the ridge, not to press her, not even to talk, just to be near something real. He found her in the barn, a lantern swinging from a nail, its light painting amber over hay and rough wood. She was mending tack, fingers nimble despite the cold. "You get lost?" she asked, not looking up. "I needed the walk." She glanced at him, then back to her stitching. "Storm's coming. You should head back before it hits." "Mind if I help a while first?" She paused, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." He worked in silence, oiling leather while she patched a harness. The quiet between them felt less like a wall now, more like a place to breathe. Snow dusted through the open barn door, and somewhere in the loft, a pigeon cooed, soft and content. "I used to think I was meant for something bigger," we said after a while, voice low. "Something polished, important. And now, I'm starting to wonder if maybe this is it. The small, hard things, the kind that last." She didn't speak for a long time. Then she stood, stretched her back, and looked out into the snow. "You ever lose something you can't replace?" she asked. "Yes." "Then you stop needing more. You just hold tight to what you've got left." He nodded. "That's why you stay." "It's not just grief," she said. "It's love, too, the kind that doesn't leave when people do." That night the snow deepened, and the wind howled like it remembered old hurts. We's made it as far as the corral before the whiteout closed in. Eleanor found him trying to make a lean-to against the barn wall. "You'll freeze out here," she said. "I don't mind." "Well, I do." She led him into the house. The fire was already lit, low but steady, and the warmth hit like a remembered kindness. She poured him coffee, set a bowl of stew in front of him without ceremony. He ate in silence, grateful for every bite. When the dishes were cleared, they sat by the hearth. Her dog rested between them, his breathing slow and sure. "You never remarried," we said. "No." "Why?" She stared into the flames. "Because no one ever stayed, not really. They wanted the land or the comfort, not me." We watched her hands, rough and strong. "I'm not leaving." "You will when the thaw comes." He shook his head. "I won't." She turned to him then, really looked. And in that look was the weight of all her winters, all her waiting, a question without voice. He didn't answer it, not yet. Instead, he reached out slowly, took her hand in his. She didn't pull away. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, the fire held. And between them, something fragile and fierce began to bloom, rooted in silence and shared stillness. The storm raged on through the night, but they didn't let go. By morning, the wind had settled. The snow blanketed the valley thick and undisturbed, a fresh page waiting for tracks. Inside the house, the hearth had burned low but steady, and the air held a hush that made voices seem louder than they meant to be. Weez awoke in the rocking chair near the fire, his back stiff and warm from the dog curled beneath his legs. Eleanor had not returned to her room after they'd sat in silence the night before. Instead, she had fallen asleep by the opposite hearthstone, her head resting on a folded quilt, her breath quiet and even. He watched her for a moment, not out of want, but out of reverence. She was not soft in the way stories might paint women. She was harder than most men he knew, tempered by the kind of love that demands work and loss. And yet, in sleep, her face seemed younger, unworried, the lines smoothed by rest and trust. When she stirred, she looked to him without surprise. "You should check your horse," she said. "I will." The words came easy now, a rhythm found between them. As he stood to stretch, he offered her a hand. She took it, no pretense. The days that followed settled into a pattern, not spoken, not agreed upon, just lived. We's remained on the ranch. He mucked stalls, chopped wood, helped repair a roof beam weakened by snow. Eleanor cooked in silence, let him eat beside her, handed him gloves without asking when the wind bit harder. They spoke little but learned much. He saw how she moved through grief like a river bends around stone, wearing it down, shaping herself to it without ever truly breaking. She watched him rise early, work with hands unaccustomed to labor but determined, and she understood that not all men who came with contracts came only to take. One evening, as the cold deepened and smoke curled into the star-drenched sky, Weeze asked her to walk with him. They didn't go far, just to the ridge where the cottonwood stood. Its bare branches reached toward the moon like fingers asking for grace. "This where he's buried?" Weeze asked. She nodded, under the tree. He removed his hat, held it to his chest. "You come here often." "Only when I need to remember who I am." They stood there a while. The cold seeped through their coats but didn't drive them away. "He was a good man," she said finally. "Quiet, gentle, taught me to build the fence lines right, even when no one would see. I'd have liked to meet him. He'd have liked you." That admission felt like a doorway opening. They walked back slowly, boots crunching snow. At the porch, she stopped. "You're not just staying because of me, are you?" "No, I'm staying because I finally see what matters." Her eyes searched his, not for lies but for limits. "You'll need to do more than stay," she said. "You'll need to choose this." "I already have." She nodded once, then stepped aside and let him inside again. That night they sat close on the old settee, a single quilt draped over both their knees. She told him stories, about the flood that nearly took the barn, the spring a foal was born breech, and how she'd saved it with bare hands and prayer. He listened like each word was a map to somewhere he wanted to be. He told her of cities where people walked past each other like ghosts, where money meant more than mercy. Of his father's law office, all glass and cold, and the way he'd left it without a backward glance. She didn't ask why he left. She could tell it had to be done. In the flickering firelight, his hand found hers again. This time it stayed. There was no urgency, no need to claim, just a quiet understanding that something had begun, something neither of them had expected. Outside, the snow melted slowly under the hush of night. And inside, a new season crept in, not of weather but of want, of choosing to stay, of belonging. Not just to the land, but to each other. Spring arrived not with fanfare, but with a softness that unfolded by degrees. The snow receded from the edges first, revealing dark earth and stubborn roots. Ice broke loose from the creek near the orchard, and the cottonwoods sent up the first green shoots like whispers of hope. "We stayed." He'd written to Harrow in late winter, a short letter with no pleasantries. He returned the contract unsigned, unaccompanied by explanation. What he had found on that land could not be sold or moved or measured in figures. The silence from the banker was answer enough. Each morning, Weeze rose before the sun and saddled a horse that had begun to recognize him. He rode fence lines not because he was paid to, but because they needed mending, and because this was his work now. Work that mattered. Elinor no longer watched from a distance. She worked beside him, matching his pace, showing him how to plant feed in dry soil, how to speak to skittish livestock, how to listen to the wind for signs of coming change. He slept in the back room now, one that had sat empty since her husband's passing. It still held the smell of old wood and linseed oil. She had cleaned it without telling him, left folded shirts on the bed one morning without a word. He had moved in that night. Their days were full. Hard, yes, but full in a way that city hours had never been. They spoke when there was something to say and held the silence without apology. Some evenings they read by firelight, pages rustling gently between them. Some nights when the sky was clear, they sat on the porch and watched stars blink into life. It was not sudden, this thing between them. It grew like the grass after frost, tentative, persistent, rooted deep. One morning, Elinor found him in the orchard, kneeling beside a young apple sapling he'd planted without telling her. She stood quiet for a moment, then stepped beside him. "That tree won't bear for years," she said. "I can wait," he replied, looking up at her. She nodded, her eyes bright in the morning light. That afternoon, they drove the wagon into town together for supplies. Folks nodded as they passed, no longer curious, only glad. At the mercantile, Mrs. Rayburn behind the counter smiled and said, "You two always made sense. Took you long enough to see it." On the ride home, Weeze took Elinor's hand where it rested between them. She didn't pull away. She only looked at him, and then forward again, like the future was a road they could finally see. That night, as the wind stirred gently through the grass and the dog dozed by the hearth, he asked her something simple. "Is this home now?" he said. She looked around the room, not at the walls, but at the space they filled together, the quiet they had made sacred. "Yes," she said, "this is home." He leaned close, pressed his lips to her brow like a promise. And though no ceremony marked the moment, though no grand words were spoken, something sacred passed between them. Not just love, not even just peace. It was choosing, it was presence, it was staying. We said come, needing her land. What he found was something harder to claim and infinitely more precious. Her love given, not taken. Earned and kept.